By setting the binomial to 0, you are basically making what I had just had, which was x squared plus 16x plus 48 equals 0. If you set it to 0, then when you factor it down into what I just had, which is x plus 12 and then x plus 4 equals 0, then to find the x, you would get two different answers. I don't know if you've done this before, but getting two different answers can end up in extraneous equations. And extraneous answers. And extraneous answers can end up in you not actually getting the correct answer. But for the moment, since we don't have anything equaling our polynomial to, since it's 0, we won't have any extraneous equations for the moment. So when you set it to 0, then it would be x plus 12 equals 0, which would make x equal negative 12, and x would equal negative 4 since x plus 4 is set to 0 as well. So this would be both of your answers. Now, I know I didn't tell you to solve the answer for the last polynomial, but now I'm going to give you another example and ask you to solve the answer for that. And I will do a quick flyby of how to solve it if you don't get it as well. So it'll be x squared plus, think of one, got a simple one if you know your squares, 24x plus 144. I'll give you about 15 to 20 seconds to solve this. It should be easy since your c value is a square. You should know exactly what to do with it. Okay, now go ahead and keep trying to solve it if you haven't solved it yet. But I'm going to go ahead and show you what the answer will be. The answer would be x plus 12 and x plus 12. Or it would be, in more simplified terms in Algebra 2, x plus 12 squared. Now, either of these answers are correct. This answer right here is just a more simplified way of putting it, x plus 12 squared. Now, how did we get that answer is very, very simple. Like I said, if you knew your squares, then you would know the answer pretty much straight off the bat. Because 12 squared equals 144, which would equal your c value. So that is right. And 12 plus 12 equals 24. So that would automatically solve that. But what was the answer for the x value? Well, the only answer that you could have, since it was a square, would be negative 12. Since it was a square value, the only answer you could have was a negative 12, so it would be no extraneous equation, even if it was equal to anything. Or you would have no solution at all. So your answer would be negative 12. So, I'm going to show you what would happen when you have a coefficient. Now, coefficients are dastardly beings. I hate them so bad. They just make your polynomials so much more difficult to solve. Coefficients, as you know, it is ax plus bx plus c. That is the equation. Well, the a is a coefficient, and the b is a coefficient. Well, now you might be saying, well, Destructive Wolf, but we already went over a b. You know, it's like 6x and 8x and 4x and all that stuff that we just went over. Well, yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this a. Before I said that we had no coefficient on the x, so it was automatically 1. But now I'm going to show you what would happen if it was 2, or maybe 4, or maybe 8. So I'm going to give you an example, show you the instructions of solving it, and the instructions for solving it, well, to me, is pretty much basically on your own thought process. Whoa, look at my hands. So, let me think of a really simple one really quick. 2x squared plus, let's see, we're going to have a 4 here. So, it would be 6x. Okay, 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. Seems simple, right? So, if you want to factor this down into binomials, then here's the coefficient, the dastardly being. You would have to put that into only one of the binomials. In other words, if the 2 was really a 4, then you would be able to factor it down into 2 and 2. Or you maybe just be able to factor it down into 4 and 1. Now, if you were to put that into a binomial, then it would be 4 and x. 4x and 4x. Or 4x and 1x. Jeez. Or it could be 2x and 2x. Now, you might be saying, oh, Destructive Wolf, what is this going to cause in my answer? Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't seem like it does anything. Well, now it does. As you can see, 2 and 2 out of 4 does not equal 6. And 4 and 1 equals 5x. So, there's this 2 here. Now, what are we going to do about this 2? I know what we can do. We can create the 6x by using that 2. Now, since 4 can distribute into either 4 and 1 or into 2 and 2, we can use one of these 2's to make a 4 by timesing it by this 2 that we used here. So, since 2 and 2 is really the only way to go to get an even number, which is 6, we can put 2x plus 2 and then x plus 2. By doing this, if we distribute, then it would come out like this. We would have 2x squared. Correct. Now, this 2 over here would no longer be 2x, because this is a 2. If you timed this by this now, you would come out with a 4x. So it would be just 2x times 2, which would be 4x. Which would be 4x. So it would come out to plus 4x. But the other 2 is exactly the same, and it would just time by the x. So it would be 2x. So 4x plus 2x would equal 6x. And 2 times 2 equals 4. Which we would come out to the exact same polynomial that we started with. There we go. So now that I have showed you the instructions of showing, or basically, of how to factor out these polynomials, I'm going to ask you for the answer on the next one. The way you get an answer with a complex polynomial with a coefficient at the beginning is the exact same way. You set it to 0, and then you basically do the equation. So if I had a polynomial like I just had, which was 2x plus 2 and x plus 2, and I set it to 0, then my answers would be negative 2, and then divided by 2, which would equal negative 1. And then, for this one, it would be just negative 2, because there is no coefficient here but 1. And then you times that by the negative 2. 1 times negative 2 equals 2. So, these are the two equation answers that we get. So now I'm going to give you a example, and I'm going to wait for you to solve it. See if you can do it. So let me make up an equation really quick, one that can be simple to answer. We can make it a 4, and I don't want to make it just too much like the one I just did, so we'll go ahead and do 7x. Oh my goodness! Oh, what's going on? Oh, earthquake. So there's your equation, and I'll give you about 30 or 15 to 30 seconds to try and solve it, if that is correct. I'm pretty sure that is correct. While you're trying to solve it, I'll try to see if it is correct. Pretty sure it is. Alright, so, I don't know if that was 30 seconds or 15 or whatever, but I'm not going to go ahead and bother and wait any longer. Because I'm pretty sure this already extended into 2 videos. I don't know. I'm going to have to separate them. So, here we have a 3x instead. 3 does not factor out into anything but 3 and 1 because it is a prime number. So, it's going to have to stay as 3 as we put it into a binomial. So, we're going to have 3x and then an x over here. So, you could flip it around and say an x over here and then a 3x over here. It really makes no difference. It really just comes down to the way you distribute it. If you put a 3x over here, it helps me to be more organized. I always put, most of the time, the bigger number on the left. It makes it a lot easier to figure out your equation and your binomials. So you want to get this number correct. And as I showed you previously, you can times this 3 by a number over here to get a larger x than beforehand. So the factors of 4 are 2 and 2, or just 4 and 1. Now, here's where you have to make a heavy decision. Should I do 2 and 2 or 4 and 1? Well, in this case, we're supposed to do 4 and 1. If you already tried 2 and 2 and you figured out that it doesn't work, yeah, because it always comes out to even numbers. And you'll notice that we have an odd b. When we have an odd b, we have to have a 1, or it does not make any sense. So we have to use 4 and 1. But where do we use it? We'll put a 4 over here, so it just distributes with this x and just makes a 4x. But we can put the 1 over here, and then this distributes with this, making a 3x. And everyone knows that 4x plus 3x equals 7x. And 4 times 1 equals 4. So, I asked you for the answer, not just the binomial. So what would the answer be? Don't be surprised if you get a fraction. When you get fractions, it is very, very common in binomials. Unless, well, if you have a coefficient at the front. If you don't have a coefficient at the front, then most of the time it won't come out in fractions. Well, really, all the time it won't. So, we would set it to 0, and then we would have 3x equals negative 4. And over here we just have x equals negative 1. So that would be 1 right there. But 3x equals negative 4, and that would mean that x equals negative 4 over 3. Now here's your ugly fraction. I think decimals are worse. So I'm just going to stick with it. And there's your 2 answers, basically. There's nothing more to do for this. So I'm going to give you one last tip of advice with the coefficient at the beginning, and give you one last example for these videos. So, yeah. As you know that the coefficient can be more than 3 or 2. It can be not a prime number. Let's say 6x squared, for example. This can go out to 2 and 3, or it can go out into 6 and 1. So when you put it into a binomial, as I said before, it could be 2x, and then over here could have a 3x, or over here could have a 6x, and over here could have a regular x. So it can make things a lot more difficult when you can make a factor out of a 6. So, oh, my right hand's getting so black I can't erase anything. So I'm going to give you an example before I let you go on this one and get a freaking rag. So let's say 8x squared. Now let me think of something else to use. With a 6. That'll make it difficult.